So, what's up, everybody? So, welcome back to the podcast. First of all, today's episode, we're going to be talking about, does gear matter? And the first answer is yes, but at the same time, it doesn't. What I mean by that is, it depends on the project, what you're using your gear for. So, like, let's say you go onto like something like an engagement shoot. You want to have a camera that does really well when taking photos, especially so you don't miss a moment. But then let's say that you're doing something more like an engagement party inside. You don't want to go in there with just your camera alone. You want to take a flash with you, just so you can light up your subject, so you can ensure you get the best photos as possible. Now, those are just like two short examples, but like I said, it really just depends on the project. Let me go here and look at my notes real fast, cause that'll be a lot better. Now, another reason why I made this episode, why I want to make this episode, because it seems like, especially on YouTube, it seems like if you're not using the latest and greatest name brand gear when it comes to photos and videos, then they consider it budget. And sometimes I do have a problem with that. I mean, yes, it's nice to have gear that work just as well as the top name brand gear, but that could fit into your budget. But is it really budget? Because I feel like when people use that term, they're thinking like the gear is not as good, so that's why it don't cost as much. In reality, that is not the case at all. So my first example is Aperture Lighting. So Aperture really started off as a budget brand to compete with Westcott. So let's say if you didn't have a lot of money to buy Westcott lighting, you went with Aperture. And a lot of times, that's what a lot of people did, especially for running gun cinematographers. But now Aperture is so big that they actually are a name brand company. And a lot of people use Aperture, especially on YouTube and more smaller productions. But outside of them, you also have Godox now, who came into the lighting game. And I'm actually using one of their lights right now. And it's amazing. This light right here is actually made to compete with Aperture. This Godox XL 60 watt is actually competing with the Aperture 120D or 120D Mark II. And this light itself is like a fraction of the cost. The softbox itself is a fraction of the cost. And you still get the same quality light out of here that you would get with an Aperture lighting. So, is it budget because it don't cost that much? Or, like I said, this lighting is really good. It's just a fraction of the cost of what the name brand companies would charge you. Cause let's be honest, not everybody have $500 to $600, $700 to spend on one light source. I mean, to a lot of people, that's not possible, especially since we're still in the middle of a pandemic where a lot of people lost their jobs, or a lot of people, they're not bringing in much money as they used to. So, you have to find alternatives to make something work for your projects. Let me go back here in my notes. Okay, so another example is I use Fujifilm cameras, and they're amazing. I'm just gonna say that right off the bat. It's the reason why I chose to use that camera brand, that ecosystem. But their lenses are super expensive. I mean, not super, but they are really expensive. For example, the lens that I have on right now is a 16mm 1.4, brand new. Even though this lens is like 4 or 5 years old, I think, or probably a little bit older. It's $1,000, which is insane for one lens. But at the same time, this lens does have some amazing quality. Now, Viltrox came out with their own set of lenses for the Fuji ecosystem, and now Tokina did the same thing, and now Sigma is following suit. But with Viltrox, they were the first, and they didn't make a counterpart to this lens yet, but they did make a counterpart to the 23mm, 35mm, 56. Then they have an 85mm as well. But I own the 23 and 56mm. And for comparison, I actually rented the Fuji 56mm f1.2 in the past and shot with that lens for like a month straight. And that lens was amazing. I mean, the bokeh you got on that lens, the image quality, how it just rendered the photo. I mean, it was just amazing. I mean, I didn't want to send that lens back. I was willing to rent it for another month, but I didn't, because I'm looking like, you know what? I'm just going to wait for the Viltrox version to come out, and I'm just going to buy that lens, which I did. And honestly, I'm not disappointed at all. Now, the Viltrox version is not 1.2, it's 1.4, but you can still capture an amazing image with that lens. And I do all the time because I love the compression of the 85mm focal length as well, which is what the APS-C 56mm is in full frame terms. Now I'm going back in my notes, but before I do that, actually, just so is it budget that I'm choosing these less affordable lenses that can compete with the Fuji 9 lenses just as well? Because honestly, if I don't tell you what lens I'm shooting with, you won't know that I'm shooting either with a Viltrox lens or a Fuji lens, because they have damn near the same image quality and you really can't tell. Now if you're shooting like directly into the sun, then yeah, you could kind of tell, because the Fuji lens have a special coating, like a nano coating on their glass, that help you tame some flares, and the Viltrox don't. But like I said, at the same time, if you're not doing something like that and you're shooting both of these lenses, it's gonna be hard to tell which lens you're shooting with. I mean, a lot of people think they can really tell, but honestly they can't. To be honest, I hate that term when it comes to filmmaking, because like I said in the beginning, it make it feel like that if you're not going with the latest name brand options, then it make you feel like that you can't shoot something as good as somebody like Peter McKinnon or Matty Hipoya can, because they have the best gear possible. When in reality, when they first started, they didn't have that gear. I mean, Peter McKinnon said like he started with just one camera and one lens when he left the camera shop. Like all the gear he had before, he had to send back because it was actually that camera shop's gear. And he made some amazing photos, some amazing videos back then. And a lot of other people started in the same place. I myself actually started a different YouTube channel a couple years ago, and I started with a Panasonic camera. I started with a Micro Four Thirds system. My first Panasonic camera was the G85. Then my second Panasonic camera was the GH5. And honestly, that GH5 is a beast, and it's still a beast today. And it just came out with the Mark II recently. So even though the GH5 was an amazing video camera, I didn't like the photo image I was getting out of that. So I switched over to Fuji, because Fuji was much more of a better hybrid option for video and photos. And since I switched, I haven't looked back. Now, I did shop with Canon for a year, but honestly, their images and photos was amazing. But on the M50, their video quality I didn't like that much. But the images, like I said, for photos was amazing, and it was kind of toss up if I should go with the 90D or the X-T3. And I thought about that for a couple weeks, but then I eventually went to the X-T3 and I never looked back. And the reason I went to the X-T3 is because it had F-Log. So like I said, it was a much better hybrid option when it came to video editing and photography. So in that perspective, gear did matter, because it mattered personally to me, because I felt like with the GH5 I wasn't getting the best image quality as possible. So I had to switch over to a system that offered better photo capabilities, so I can actually use this as a true hybrid system, and I have been. But now I don't have the X-T3 anymore because I upgraded to the X-T4. But my B camera to this is the Fujifilm Xs10, which is an amazing camera. It's almost identical to the X-T4 as far as functions and image quality, except with video, it only shoots 8-bit internally, which is honestly okay with me, because I bought that to be my vlogging camera. I didn't buy that to be my main camera when it comes to production. Even though if you put an Atomos Ninja 5 on that camera, you'll definitely be able to shoot 10-bit via HDMI. So another issue with this topic is that a lot of people make you feel inadequate because you're not shooting with a full frame camera. Now, a lot of people do choose to shoot full frame because you do get a shallower depth of field, which is very nice when it comes to photos. But video, honestly, it shouldn't matter. Hollywood was shooting with APS-C or Super 35 for decades before they ever start shooting with a full frame camera. Netflix actually approved the Lumix BGH1, I think it's called, which is a cinema camera from Panasonic, but it's Micro Four Thirds. But they also approved the Canon C70, which is an APS-C or Super 35 sensor. So for today, in like these high productions that we're seeing on Netflix or in Hollywood, a lot of times they're not using full frame cameras. They're still using APS-C or Super 35. So why the hell will all these YouTubers make you feel like that if you're not shooting full frame, you're not shooting professionally, when it's just bullshit? So when you're on YouTube, you have to be careful of when you listen to somebody, especially when they're preaching full frame this, full frame that, because a lot of times you're just regurgitating that from another YouTuber they listen to, especially if their image quality is shit and they don't know how to shoot. I mean, I went through that personally. Is when I switched from the GH5 to Fuji, I thought, oh, I got a better camera. I'm about to shoot better videos. They should come out crispy. But what I learned is that the problem was me. It wasn't my camera, which is why I do kind of regret selling my GH5, because I had such a powerful camera then. And this same sensor is actually in a Panasonic cinema camera, but I didn't know how to use it. I didn't know how much power I had in my hand. So when I bought the Fuji X-T3, I told myself, like, all right, I'm going to learn with this camera for a year, and I'm going to learn how to color grade with this camera. And I did, and this is why when I switched over to the Fuji X-T4, I was more comfortable with that camera. And like I said, I know how to color grade better now. I know how to color grade without having my image fall apart, especially now since I color grade in DaVinci Resolve. I used to be just like these people, just regurgitating information that I heard from another YouTuber, thinking that it's true, when in reality, it's not. At least it's not true for me, because like I said, they say full frame this, full frame that, but for me, APS-C is totally fine. I get amazing image quality from my Fuji. I get amazing photo qualities from my Fuji. And I don't have to pay an arm and a leg for the full frame camera and then pay another $1,000 to $2,000 for a full frame lens. Especially if you're looking at the top cameras today, which is like the Canon R6, $2,500. The Canon R5, $3,500. The Sony a7S III, I think it's like $33, $34. It's almost the same price as the R5. And then the Sony FX3, which is about a little bit more expensive than the 7S III. But I'll be honest though, I do kind of want to try out the FX3 because I like how they built that camera with its own cage like body, and now you could just throw gear directly onto the camera and don't have to buy a separate cage to build it out. So I do like that concept. Will I ever switch over to Sony? No, because I'm much more comfortable with Fuji. I like Fuji. I like their ecosystem, especially since they're the masters of color science, and I do prefer their colors over Canon and Sony's. But the FX3 would just be nice to try. And to be honest, if I was to ever go buy an actual cinema camera, I'd probably go with Blackmagic 6K Pro because I do like those cameras. And Leonard from Michigan Streets and Eats, he actually have the 4K and the 6K Pro now. So honestly, I could just play with both of those cameras when I'm with him and see if I really like them or not. If they're really worth the investment, to me personally, because that's what matters. Just because somebody else have a camera that shoot really well, it don't mean that I need that camera or you need that camera or somebody else need that camera. We should only buy gear that we need for ourselves and not just because somebody else told us. Perfect example, this mic that I'm talking to, which is the Rode Video Mic NTG. I've been meaning to buy this mic for months, ever since last year, really, ever since it came out, but I just haven't pulled the trigger. But I've been seeing a lot of people been complaining about audio on my channel. But so I'm looking like, all right, let me just buy this mic and see how it hold up, see what it make everything better. And yeah, it does actually. Now this mic do cost $250, so it may not be readily available to a lot of people, but it's definitely worth the investment because I can use this mic as a shotgun mic, which is what it's for. But I can also use this mic as a podcast mic, which is what I'm using it for now. So it serves different functions. Or I could just put this on my camera and interview somebody when I'm running and gunning, and I can still get amazing audio from this mic. So it served multiple purposes, not just one. So when I made that investment, I knew I was going to use it for different type of situations. It's the best way to say that, and I will. And I'll probably be taking this mic outside either today or tomorrow to really test it out there with the new Deadcat if it come in by tomorrow. So thank you to everybody who checked out the podcast. Thank you to everybody who's been tuning in. I will try to get back to uploading each episode every Monday. But if you guys want to know more, leave a comment down if you're watching this on YouTube, or just try to contact me either on Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter, and let me know what you guys want to hear about. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.